drama stream. I have no interest in that.
I'm live. You're not going to have a wobble again, are you? Fucking annoying me.
Oh, is DJ Mule live? Yeah, I'll send you over into DJ Mule. Go for it. Yeah, Free Palestine. Back on Saturday. Enjoy the rest of the week and the rest of the stream. Free.
Under party systems in which backroom dealing, they're basically just Chuck Schumer. They're basically just a bunch of Chuck Schumers when you get right down to it. They are pencil pushing, pencil necks.
Sorry, President Sunday.
Who act all reasonable and then call the cops anyways.
Go away.
Hey everybody, it's John from the Cog.
Hello, Sly Lotus. Welcome. The reason you're seeing just a picture of me, a photo that I've kind of fancied up a bit, I've got a mask on. I've been having a little bit of a breakout around about my chin and around the side of my mouth and on my cheeks. So I'm wearing a mask currently. It'll be coming off in about 10 minutes. Then you'll get to see me.
Is dead. Thanks so much for watching. If you'd like to support the music and get early access to every new song and video, then become a patron at patreon.com/thecogisdead.
Way back when I
was just a child, my days were filled with loneliness. I'd sit and make my silly music. No, I wasn't very social, but why would I want to be when all I ever got from kids at school was ridicule? I don't care what they think, I love the things I do. No, I don't fit their mold, I went and broke that thing in two. And maybe I've become exactly what they feared. Wonderfully, wildly, whimsically, wondrously, what? It's great to be weird. And so they told me I was stupid because I did things differently. I didn't fit what they deemed normal. What is normal anyway? Still, I tried my best, but it all was effort wasted. How could they not see that ADD was part of me? I don't care what they think, I love the things I do. No, I don't fit their mold, I went and broke that thing in two. And maybe I've become exactly what they feared. Wonderfully, wildly, whimsically, wondrously, what? It's great to be weird. Well, in time I grew and still pursued the things about which I was passionate. And to my amazement, I found others who are just as strange as me. And now I finally found my people. Love instead of mockery. If you feel weird, just come in here. A community of unity. I don't care what they think, I love the things I do. No, I don't fit their mold, I went and broke that thing in two. And maybe I've become exactly what they feared. Wonderfully, wildly, whimsically, wondrously, what? It's great to be weird.
Hey everybody, it's John from The Cog is Dead. Thanks so much for watching. If you'd like to support the music and get early
I will be on camera momentarily, okay? Face mask to deal with the a breakout on my face. It's been a while since I've had to use a face mask. I think I might have been overly stressing myself about certain things. Right. What is a Panopticon? Go away, Simon. If anyone's got any recommendations about this. Hello, Scribby. You'll see me momentarily. I've got a face mask on. Have you got any recommendations for a good video for Panopticon? Specifically Bentham's one. That one might be good. That might be a bit better. Hmm. Hmm. That one's fine. Okay. I will be back momentarily. Do-do-do-do-do. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Get it to you. Yes, remove mudcat. Video. Add source. Go. Add source. Leo. Ta-da! Your lass is here. Maybe a little bit more. A bit. Aha! Hello! Oh god, my light. Still can't see me. That's better. There we go. Hello. Hello, hello. Your lass is here. Now, hopefully, that acid face mask will work and the breakout will stop from getting worse. So they were down here, around here, and just up here a bit. I'm feeling nice and refreshed. That is better. Yep, this one looks good. Miles Young.
Jeremy Benson's Panopticon. So
Oh.
I'll be breaking this presentation.
Bonsoir indeed. I'm feeling a lot better. There we go. Good evening, John the Brazen. Welcome, welcome. To explain, to show what Shaban Mahmood was actually talking about, here is the original Panopticon that Jeremy Bentham introduced, or postulated. Wunavert. And please don't surveil us like that, we've not done anything wrong. Oh, you don't need to worry if you haven't done anything wrong, you'll be fine. Fuck off, no. Think I trust you lot with that sort of surveillance power, get wrecked. God, she's a fucking monster, isn't she? Oh, thank you so much though, John. Yeah, you don't need to do that for a while. I got the photos of your leaflets. They look awesome. Self-care is good care. If you need to leave, sleep is good. Sleep is good. I would hope you would stay for this one though, so you know what a Panopticon is.
Hello, my name is Miles, and today I'll be briefly presenting on what I'm calling the fiction of total vision in Jeremy Benson's Panopticon. So I'll be breaking this presentation into two sections. In the first section, I'll be talking about what the Panopticon is, what the Panopticon accomplishes, and what the architecture looks like. And then the second part, I'll be giving a brief overview into the architectural symbolism of the Panopticon and how that image of this architectural device has become a social image for the construction of utopian and surveillance societies. So the Panopticon was created around 1789 by English philosopher Jeremy Bentham. He created, or
Oh, don't you worry about it. Well, I washed my hair today because it needed it. It's a greasy nightmare. Trying to look after this is kind of difficult. Yours looks, not that minimising or anything. Yours looks good. Don't you worry. Mine's is difficult because it's greasy and flyaway. My hair's weird. Plus I've got psoriasis. I have to use Polytar shampoo once a week. I do it on Saturdays.
commissioned someone to create these two drawings. So in its basic form, it is the plan of the ideal prison. So that image on the left shows the floor plan of the structure. You just have a guard tower in the middle. You have surveillance corridors. Then here you have a section of the same building. And so in the first part, I'll just be giving you a brief overview into how the Panopticon functions. So it's a round structure that's about 100 feet diameter. It employs some of the new materials of iron, steel, and glass in the 1790s. It's 100 feet diameter. Around the perimeter of the circle stretch individual cells. Each cell is 9 feet deep, with that guard towers that donate in the middle.
Son or favorite human, I think. Favorite being of Hera. She used him to guard things because Zeus. I could actually show you that video from Overly Sarcastic. That's quite fun. That'd be the Hermes video, I think. Bloody hell, molting again, for Christ's sake.
Here we have the view of the cell. Each cell has a prison toilet for sanitation, plumbing, work area, so the person is confined to their cell 24 hours a day. And it's designed with ventilation in mind, with the idea of miasma theory and the theory that if you ventilate the prison better, it will be better, more healthful, so it's a reform device. Then at every other floor, there was a surveillance corridor. This is all designed or modeled according to Bentham's exact instructions in his text, where in each of the 3 surveillance corridors, a single guard can survey 2 prisoners and 2 tiers of cells. The guard can see the prisoners, but the prisoners cannot see the guards, but there is this one-way visibility. You watch, but you do not know when you are being watched. So 3 guards each see 96 prisoners, which makes 288 prisoners total. And this gives you an idea of how the Panopticon functions. There is, in the middle of the space, there is an auditorium where the prisoners can gather to attend chapel. And then within this auditorium, in the back, there rises a...
Ooh, chapel. Okay, it's like slight tangent here. Chapel is what we call Roman Catholic Church. So it's up here in Scotland, it's a chapel, or there's a church, or there's a kirk, which is a large church. So when people say chapel, I have to get them to clarify if they mean Roman Catholic, because churches are Protestant, chapels are Catholic. It's the same in Northern Ireland as well. In Ireland, I think they've got chapels as well. So chapel, Catholic, church, Protestant, or Methodist, or Baptist. They're churches as well.
Screen that prevents views from the prisoners looking into the chapel or seeing each other from across the void of the empty space in the middle. So the Panopticon is a complex, almost technological kind of structure that sits in this historical context of, I think, Enlightenment thought and utopian thought in the 1780s and 1790s. There rises also throughout the space, of course, a stairwell linking the floors, and employs all these new materials of brick, iron, glass technology as a kind of reform architecture, an architecture that reforms the prison or rationalizes the prison form by individualizing each prisoner in a separate cell. And that completes the Panopticon as this 100-foot diameter circle that lies in 6 floors and is easy to serve.
Are they not? Do you think I might need to read that, Scribby? As always, the Philosophy channel, post any book recommendations for me in there. I'll get round to them eventually, hopefully before I shovel off this mortal coil. That's the problem. Leftist book lists, leftist reading just keeps on getting longer and longer and longer and longer and longer. Endless pursuit of knowledge is good.
Now we're going to enter the Panopticon, and I'll just give you a brief point of view of what it looks like inside this space based on this computer model. The space on this side is the guard tower or the blinds. You can't see in, but they can see out. You see the individual cells, and then up above the tiers of walkways that link the different cells together. Then as you rise up through the space, you turn around, you'll get a view into the individual prisoner's cell. we'll continue background to space and begin to enter the auditorium in the middle in a moment. So this is just to give you an idea of what the architectural space looks like, and then in the second part I'll talk about how it was applied. Here's the guard surveillance corridor. Pass through that corridor into the space where the prisoners would gather to be lectured. We'll look up. Benton talks about how circulation of air goes through these pipes, these columns that rise through space and kind of heat the space and ventilate it. You can exit through the ceiling. You go into the bottom, we exit out. There's that cross section of floor plan we saw earlier. That completes the Panopticon.
Mm-hmm.
And here we have this quote in the second part when we talk briefly about how the Panopticon was reused and repurposed. And Michel Foucault writes in 1975 that this enclosed, segmented space observed at every point in which the individuals are inserted, in a fixed place in which the slightest movements are supervised, in which all events are recorded, in which an uninterrupted work of writing links the center and periphery, which power is exercised without division according to a continuous hierarchical figure, which each individual is constantly located, examined, and distributed among the living beings, the sick and the dead. All this constitutes a complex model of the disciplinary mechanism. So Foucault's really taking this architectural form and applying it, I feel, as a social institution for the operative mechanisms of societies as a whole. He talks about this sense of one-way visibility as well, that the major effect of the Panopticon to induce the inmate a state of conscious and permanent visibility, that is, they are always watched, and assures the automatic functioning of power. So to arrange things at the start is permanent in its effect, that is, a prisoner's.
I've got Leviathan somewhere. I don't know what the fuck I've done with it. I keep putting meaning I a Christmas present for myself. So it's somewhere. I really should read Leviathan. Oh, no, YouTube. Doodles! I like your name. It's cool. Hello, Scribbles. Welcome in, my dear. The Panopticon. Oh, you might want to see that. Do you know who Shabana Mahmood is, darling? I might bring up that story and we can go through it. Helena just covered it.
Think that they're always watched and must act as if they were always watched. Even if it is discontinuous action, that is, guards do not always have to be in the central tower. They might not always be watching the prisoner, same as the fact that our department technician, Stan Finney, might or might not be looking at my internet history. Even if it's discontinuous in its action, that the perfection of power should tend to render its actual exercise unnecessary. So you have this architectural form that seems to render power unnecessary, or seems to abstract it.
Did you,
However,
darling?
I'd like to begin to question this commonly accepted form that the Panopticon can model social institutions. So we have this book from 1998 called Seeing Like a State, in which he writes that no administrative system is capable of representing any existing social community except through a heroic and greatly schematized process of abstraction. The Panopticon is an abstraction of how society functions. It is an exaggeration. It is not simply a question of capacity, although, like a forest, a human community is surely far too complicated and variable to easily yield its secrets to bureaucratic formulae, to the guard in the middle. It is also a question of purpose. State agents have no interest, nor should they, describing an entire social reality. The person is individualized in their self. Google is not interested in you as a person, they're interested in you as a set of data, a set of information. They collect that information. They don't care about your personality. They care about selling you ads. So there is this simultaneous sense where in some ways the Panopticon is analogous to modern society, but there are ways in which we might begin to deconstruct or question the degree to which the Panopticon, as Foucault claims, or as is often commonly accepted, can actually model social institutions. You have also, to the contrary, this quote from Bentham, where he seemingly in the opposite, an oppositionist guy, he writes that to say all in one word, the Panopticon will be found applicable
That's better.
without exception to all establishments whatsoever, in which within a space not too large, to be covered or permitted by buildings,
chapter
the number of
13,
persons
section
may
9.
be kept under inspection.
Thank you, Scribby.
No matter how different or even opposite the purpose. So there is this tension right here. Bentham talks about the Panopticon is a universalizing kind of institution, and then we can.
Would I like Hobbes, Scribby? Or would you recommend that I read Hobbes? Two different questions, obviously, but linked, obviously.
Kind of deconstruct it, kind of try to move that into the modern era and question whether that is indeed so. There is also above right here the view from the guard tower into the prisoner's cell from the model, and then from the prisoner's cell back to the guard tower. We have that sense of one-way visibility and force, which Bentham says can be used in the design of hospitals and prisons and schools, which has kind of a darker undertone, which Foucault really picks up on. Where this reforming structure becomes something darker, becomes an incident, a symbol of surveillance, even though it began as something that was to reform. Furthermore, Bentham's Panopticon, whether Bentham realized it or not, had an important flaw, namely the possibility that the watched might one day try to find out whether they are indeed being watched. Namely, it could hazard entirely at random a minor pardonable transgression. This transgression goes unnoticed, then he could commit another, this time more serious transgression. And here we have that guard's point of view. We have this showing where actually a single guard does not see into all the cells, but they only see into a few cells at a time because of the corridors. They must walk circles around the space to continually survey. So we speak of multiple different kind of silos in this space, not in a central point of view, but multiple ones. So Google collects information about you, the NSA collects information about you, but they may or may not be in communication with each other unless they're in China. Despite the final scheme's forceful sectional diagonality, its radiating lines of vision extend not from a central point of authority, but from the middle inspection galleries. And then in the modern period, later on moving through time, we have this image of the Panopticon applied to the design of hundreds of prisons around the world, specifically starting in 1829 with Eastern State. Here we have the floor plane of Eastern State. In the center is that single guard tower. In all the green, with the radiating surveillance corridors. In red, we have individual cells. Orange, we have the individual prisoners' exercise yards. So we have this Panoptic formula that is extended from the circle to cover.
Oh, no problem, Scribbles. The philosopher? I can't remember when he was alive. Fucking hell. Scribby, help me. Oh, self-care is good care. If you need to go and lie down, go. So what's that? 6. What? It's about dinner time there. I usually have my dinner around about 5 or 6, so it's about tea time, dinner time for you. So yeah, if you need to go and lie down, darling, on you go. Stay hydrated, not necessarily with Stella. Self-care is good care. Stay based, free Palestine, and stay safe. Hope there's no many bloody ice bastards in the DFW area. Say hi to Ferret for me, would you? And give the boys a scritch for me.
The cross-section, a larger area. You have two views of what that looks like, the original guard tower, the radiating cells. And this form of the radial prison was applied to the design of over 300 prisons around the world, many dozen in the UK. So we have this Panopticon, this social reality, social idea that begins to have an architectural concrete realization, where the Panopticon is the most influential prison ever built. There are about 300 prisons around the world based on Eastern States hub and spoke with this radial floor plan. And so in this modern period, Foucault locates the disciplinary societies in the 18th and 19th centuries. They reach their height at the outset of the 20th. They initiate the organization of vast spaces of enclosure. The individual narrative sees us passing from one enclosed environment to another, each having its own laws. First the family, then the school, then the barracks. Foucault constructs this kind of universality of this disciplinary mechanism, saying it follows in its route.
Excuse me?
And I'd like to question whether that is indeed so. And so here we just have, in conclusion, we have this Google Ngram, which charts the incidence of words repeatedly appearing in printed literature. So here I just did a search for Panopticon for events structure in the 1790s. That's when most of the Panopticons were built. And this is when the internet comes into existence. We have these different peaks of Panopticism, where this architectural form is translated into this digital form, which has some difficulties in that translation process, some problems. Here we can just kind of map different events.
So here's where Bentham is. Look, we've already breached it, for fuck's sake, with the World Wide Web. Shabana Mahmood, get right. Just fuck off, you absolute monster. Just no.
Onto that timeline, we have Bentham events of Panopticon, Eastern State is built. Prisons modeled after Eastern State in that period, several hundred of them, mostly in that period. In later periods, different kinds of prisons proliferate, so the Panopticon becomes less powerful, face different kinds of prison designs, and then when the internet is founded, this real boost in growth. Then, in conclusion, I would like to end on this quote right here, that one pitfall of seeing surveillance as an all-encompassing feature of society, but also in approaches where surveillance is used as a lens to analyze certain developments, is that theoretical accounts often talk in abstract entities, institutions, the government networks, namely Foucault talks in these abstract entities. These entities are described as invisible forces exercising power over subjects. This perspective often ignores any form of situatedness, context, or the specificities of surveillance technologies and practices. So it is this quote that the Panopticon is applicable to all institutions whatsoever, but in some sense it is not. So in some sense there are limitations to the degree to which we can apply that image. So in terms of the future development of that research, I would like to look at how far we can push the image of the Panopticon into now analyzing modern surveillance states. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Oh yeah, I remember it. It's still, the actual book itself is burned onto my brain, the actual size of it and stuff. And yeah, it's chunky. It's a chunky book. And I've talked to other, my bestie. He's a poet, but he reads all these things as well. And I've asked him, said, hello my dear, hello my friend. Guess what I bought myself? What, more Lenin? No, Leviathan. Oh dear God. Katie, what are you doing to yourself? Warning, it's dense. I'm going to have to get round to reading it at some point. No, I've got the actual... I don't have the companion one. I've got the actual... Well, it's a different printing. But yeah, I've got the actual book itself. It only cost me $3.26 on Amazon, oddly enough. From what I'm getting from yourself, Scribby, and what I got from my bestie. Sounds like that was a bargain for what's in it. Very dense. I got super happy to do me a favour when he was out today, collecting his prescriptions. Mine don't need filled yet. So he went and got his meds, his inhaler, and another medicine, another pill that he's on. And I just handed him the... What have I got? I had 4 of them. So the 4 Orwell that I had, I just said to them, just hand them into the charity shop. So we have de-Orwelled this house. Get wrecked, Orwell. Yeah. God, 1984 is a fucking tough read. It's a short book, but dear God. What's your opinion of 1984, Scribby? I still haven't seen the film. I have seen 1, 2, 3, 4. I have seen 6 different versions of Animal Farm. 2 of which are animated. Yeah. Quit. Okay. I'm game. Okay, Quentin's gonna. Alright. Thank you, Scrippy. Okay, let's see. Quentin's gonna. Oops. $52 minutes, bloody hell. 52 minutes again. 52. I'm noticing a theme here. Let's see. Decade ago. Decade. 6 years. 2 years. That'd be a good idea. 7, 9 years ago. Hmm. 12 years. Hmm. I'm down and out in Paris and London type of person. Either one of these would be good, I assume. They're both Dublin. Yeah, that one.
Well, I'm an historian of philosophy, as I say, not a philosopher, but one of the things I'm going to try and persuade you of this evening is that in the case of political philosophy, that gap is not actually a very large one. There's a Nietzschean thought hovering here, which is that, as he says in the genealogy of morality, some concepts have histories, and if a concept has a history, then it's not going to have an agreed definition. And so your approach to the understanding of that concept will actually have to be historical, and will need to focus.
Hang on. Right, that's from... Oh, nice one, Sock, now. I wish you well in your endeavours. Be careful. I wouldn't want any sort of things to happen to you because of that tangerine dictator in the Oval Office. Obviously, you're not in mainland states, obviously. Well, you're not in the continental states. But keep yourself well covered. Okay? There is no point calling my government because... ain't no point. We are cucked to the White House and the State Department. Yeah. I'll just leave that paused there. I'll go and find that story. Google News. Should be in purple. There we go. Google News. Oh, it's the national... Oh no, I'll not be able to read it. That might work. Ah, motherfucker. Yeah, I thought that. I kind of get it. So we might just need to go and watch Helena's coverage of it.
Focus on the investigation of the changing terminology in which the concept is expressed. Now, a number of our political concepts are clearly of that character, and perhaps the central concept of our political lexicon is the state, and it's unquestionable that since the early modern period, that concept has been subjected to continual contestation and debate. So in talking about the history of the concept, we're talking about those very contestations about how to understand it. And so the two come together. So that's the sort of methodological thought that underlies what I'll try and say this evening. And then the first historical thought is that I think it would be completely uncontentious to say that in the Anglophone tradition, the first systematic analysis of how to think about this concept, expressed in the terminology that we would now use of state, state power, statehood, and so forth, is the work of Thomas Hobbes. But I want to use Hobbes and his view about the state to try to think about the concept itself more generally, and to think about how it might be understood and how it has been understood. Now, from having no lectern, we've now got 3, but I'm very happy with this one. Thank you very much. Very resourceful, but most grateful. Very good. I might just move between them. Now, I want to start not with Hobbes or with the early modern period when this concept is philosophically formed for the first time, but by thinking about the concept of the state and how we now generally think about it. And here I hope also to be completely uncontentious, because it seems to me that two general claims about the concept have come to be very widely accepted in current discourse. One is that when we refer to the state, what we're really talking about is simply the institutions and coercive apparatus of political power, of government. The most celebrated of these completely empirical formulations of how to think about the state is undoubtedly that of Max Weber, describing it, as you know, or rather I might say defining it, as you know, as the monopolist of legitimate power over some designated territory. And by now that way of thinking, that purely empirical way of thinking about the state, is so widely accepted that I think if you reflect for a moment on how you see the terminology used in every newspaper of the day now, the terms state and government are in common parlance synonyms. The other claim about the state that's come to be widely agreed, first being to talk about the state is to talk about the apparatus of government, I mean, that's what we're talking about, is that a number of economic and political developments have undermined and at the same time tended to discredit the power of the state. Just a word first about the undermining of state sovereignty in our time. Perhaps the most obvious cause of that has been the rise of multinational corporations, of international economic and of course they, with the capacity to control terms of investment and employment, are visibly able to coerce states into accommodating their designs, even when those designs are out of line with the policies of those states. So they have greater power, especially in the developing world, than most states. And at the same time, of course, this is obvious, the developing world has witnessed the rise of international legal institutions which claim to have a power to supervene upon the sovereignty of states. I mean, the International Courts, the International Court of Justice is the original and most important example, but there are many. So there's one part of the story, but as well as a devaluing of sovereignty, there's been a discrediting of it, has there not, with the increasing prevalence of neoliberal claims about how the use of state power should not be a means to shape a society. State power is bad, it's the monopolistic enemy of competition and enterprise, and the power of the market is instead good for shaping society. It's the
Not for good. Sorry, Professor Skinner. Don't get me wrong, state overreach is bad as well. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Maybe not a pacifist, but he is a coward. And a corrupt moral serial liar. Now, what we don't want to happen is if your president, obviously you don't class him as your president, and I quite agree with that, obviously, that tangerine dictator can get bent. Oh yeah, he is masochistic, yeah. Why do you think we've cut to America? The market isn't good either, Professor. Sorry. But I do be Marxist after all.
enabling friend of innovation and enterprise and so on. Now, those two thoughts together have persuaded a number of commentators that the power of the state is now in terminal decline. And Foucault, as you know, famously draws the moral in one of his very late interviews that we should learn to cut off the head of the monarch in political philosophy as well as in politics. That's to say, to liberate ourselves from the illusion that it still makes sense to talk about sovereign state.
I'm not going to say anything, no. Oh, by the way, for full clarity, I am a Republican, small r. That's as far as I will go. It is the 21st century, for fuck's sake. We shouldn't have a monarchy. We're lords or ladies. the other place needs to be ended as well. All right. Okie dokie. Fuck it. Fickle. Fickle? Panopticism? That might be quite easy. That won't be as bad. Go away, Simon.
It's important to point out here that up to this point, I have something really cool to bring.
No problem. Oh, this might be a good one to actually watch. It's always good to learn about Michel Foucault. Christ, it's been years since I've read him. I'd done a lot of reading from the age of like 15 up to about 30. Don't get me wrong, I've been reading throughout my life, but it's kind of dropped off a bit. I'm busy dealing with my health and stuff like that. This is only a year old.
To you all today, a service I think many of you will all find useful, that being Shortform, an online guide to nonfiction texts and articles, of which some that have been featured on this channel, from thinkers such as Rousseau and Max Weber. I personally just used Shortform to refresh my reading of Rawls's Theory of Justice, and no joke, really found it to exceed my expectations. I am truly not just saying that. Shortform offers these guides through reading, or by listening through an audiobook or podcast-like format. It's really quite an impressive package for the money, and I'll personally be using Shortform in the future when researching videos. To top it off, Shortform is offering a 5-day free trial along with 20% off for those who sign up with my link in the description below. As 21st century subjects, as people, what might we describe as the social fabric of today? Or rather, how can we describe it? I think for many, we might say heavy consumerism amidst anti-consumerism, phenomena popping up such as minimalism as a product, free live service video games that are...
I have no Foucault in this house. I foolishly left my book up at my mum's house. My last time I read Foucault was like 13 or 14 years ago. It's probably still in a box in my mum's attic. I might just go up the next time I'm up. I might just go up in the attic and see if it's there.
Simultaneously expensive. From an interpersonal level, the democratic emphasis of well-being for others, despite their race, their sexuality, their religion, but with the very specific requirement that you produce. Relationship within deeply corporate form. Essentially, the social dynamics of a giant HR department. Insincerity masked by sincerity. While certainly these types of interaction aren't exactly new, I think this is becoming a very common way in which we are parsing our surface interaction with others in the 21st century. And the 21st century is an incredibly interesting time to be analyzing Foucault, particularly his text, Discipline, and Punish. We've talked a ton about contemporary cultural theory on here, yet surprisingly enough, we haven't dedicated a video to Foucault. I'm starting with some examples here in the present, as I'd argue that this is arguably Foucault's most prophetic work. Authored in the 70s, I personally find it quite uncanny how well Foucault was able to recognize a trajectory for how interaction and social order is being conducted. And that's the focus here, order. And not just order, the reinforcing essence, that being power, how power manifests, its systemic techniques, and how we are embedded into a type of unidimensional, carceral, and punitive fabric, but a fabric that might be a lot worse than what we imagine. In order to get into the root of this, we need to start from the 18th century. Foucault highlights the historical context of punishment and its relation to establishing a type of order. Often, this is what we think of when we envision punishment. In the first chapter, he highlights the title of...
See, I'd be tempted to give you my address and send you money for postage. Or you pay the postage, and when I send it back down to you, I'll give you the postage back. So I don't need to buy them. If you're amenable to that, what one you think would be best for me to read? Be quite cool. Obviously, no pressure. You don't need to do that if you don't want to.
Of the body of the condemned and the spectacle of the scaffold. The public execution of Robert Francois Damiens, sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, in the year 1757 by dismemberment, a man who sought to assassinate King Louis XV. The use of public execution, torture, slavery, and even the visual of prisoners was always in the public eye. But the...
I was saying, you've said you've got about 10 Foucault books. If you're amenable to it, don't sweat it if you're not. I could give you my address. I could DM my address to you, or maybe whisper it on Twitch. And you could maybe send me what book you think would be best. I'd send it back down to you, obviously. To save me having to buy them. I've got a brilliant retentive memory. Remember quite a lot. This is filled with lots of knowledge. Some of it a bit odd.
Execution of Damiens was just about the most definitive example of this type of punishment. The visual is the important thing here for power, but it extends past brutality into physicality, doing things such as public works, as picking up trash. They often had distinguished appearance as prisoners by their clothing and bald heads. Punishment was served as spectacle. The result is twofold. In a type of Nietzschean spirit, people get to experience a brutal type of justice that invigorates them. The second is the regulatory function of not wanting to be on the receiving end of this. Foucault states,
"The body of the condemned man, the body that is tortured, cut into pieces, broken on the wheel, quartered, hanged, exposed, dead or alive, is the place where the vengeance of the sovereign is applied."
Body is important. That is the very medium in which this type of punishment exists. Matter of fact, Foucault argues that this domain was the primary medium a sovereign, a king, a central power was concerned about. Bodies are tactile, they are physical, they bruise, they reflect on power in the most visual manner possible. This all seems like common sense. This, in many ways, is still the logic many think of when contending with our own system. In essence, the standard logic is that we need to see punishment as visual deterrent to reinforce normative types of behavior. But Foucault thinks different, and this difference started with the death of public executions. To Foucault, this served as a gateway for the trajectory of punishment today. But we see how visceral and quite awful execution and death is. The historical logic so far has been that we've done away with the barbarity. We've embraced a more humane function of punishment. We've enabled human rights. Well, Foucault doesn't really think so. Matter of fact, the horror of this may be that our current system is worse. Foucault contrasts the historically former spectacle of punishment with
a utopia of judicial reticence. Take away life, but prevent the patient from feeling it. Deprive the prisoner of all rights, but do not inflict pain. Impose penalties free of all pain.
Foucault describes the type of public execution seen in history as a type of utilitarian mercy. The punishment is the end result, not the process therein. This is where stuff flips. This flip starts with the birth of the prison. From the progression of modernity, we sought ways to more humanely dole out punishment and deter lawless behavior. But that's only half the equation here. Power saw the spectacle of execution as a potential threat to its existence. Foucault states,
people were summoned as spectators. They were assembled to observe public exhibitions and amende honorable. Pillories, gallows, and scaffolds were erected in public squares or by the roadside. Sometimes the corpses of the executed persons were displayed for several days near the scenes of their crimes. Not only must the people know, they must see with their own eyes, because they must be made to be afraid, but also because they must be the witnesses, the guarantors of the punishment, and because they must, to a certain extent, take part in it.
There's two things here. In order for an execution to work, the people must be present. This bears witness to the brutality of a king, which, while the point, also highlights how easy the person executed could be them, for reasons that may not be truthful nor their fault. The second is that it ironically empowers the spectator. They understand that in order for execution to work, they must be there. That, in some sense, a sovereign's existence is fundamentally tied to them. That if we're required for sovereign power to circulate, then in theory, we also hold a type of power. The historical narrative to the death of the public execution is that we merely progressed past public barbarity into a more civilized manner of conducting punishment. But as we will see, it's not quite that simple. We've now entered the prison, and as Foucault describes in Part 2, the gentle way in punishment. And the gentle way is a much more powerful phenomenon. It's this phenomenon, the prison, that marks a shape in disciplinary power that we experience today, despite fundamental status of a king or rules invoking punishment. Power isn't held in the same overtly authoritative manner, but something internal and deeply psychological, something that regulates the very inner workings of yourself.
The apparatus of corrective penalties acts in a quite different way. The point of application of the penalty is not the representation, but the body, time, everyday gestures, and activities. The soul, too, but insofar as it is the seat of habits. The body and soul as principles of behavior form the element that is now proposed for punitive intervention.
It's important to point out here that up to this point, Foucault is discussing punishment, the birth of the prison, to describe a logic that has infested every fiber of our being. The consequence of regulation does not exist in isolation, and with centuries of punitive development, at this point, a sovereign power, a king, a ruler, your boss, whoever, doesn't need to impose discipline in a traditional manner to Foucault. The result here is...
And sometimes this happens within family dynamics as well. I've actually seen it, not in my family, but to different different way our family operates, obviously, but it can manifest in families as well, which is having these sort of thoughts and ways of working within family, working with family members, be it your parents, your siblings, your grandparents, your aunties, your uncles, blah blah blah. So there's also that dynamic which seems to be becoming more prevalent in certain sections of society. We're mostly good, don't get me wrong, I have fallings out with my family. These things do happen, but we're not complete bastards.
Is that we, as 20th and 21st century subjects, exist as Foucault calls it, docile bodies. We'll get more into this, but in order to explain this, we need to understand how we got here, primarily through Foucault's theory of panopticism. Foucault uses the Panopticon as a metaphor for how society creates the system of regulation we adhere to. But we need to understand what a Panopticon is. There was always dark ways in which humans have tried to create more efficient prison, but arguably the most efficient for the time, and what Foucault thinks serves as the best representation, is Jeremy Bentham's late 18th century Panopticon design. The Panopticon prison works by having cells shaped in a circle with each cell facing a central watchtower, where a watchman could observe the entire lives of prisoners, and yet the prisoners could not see when the watchman was watching. The result and core philosophy of this was that prisoners would be more eager to regulate themselves. At absolutely any moment, the watchman could be watching. Thus, there is no real privacy. You, in a sense, are stripped of being human. You are now a docile body, if you will. This overarching force he labels as the disciplinary gaze.
But the disciplinary gaze did, in fact, need relays. The pyramid was able to fulfill, more efficiently than the circle, two requirements: to be complete enough to form an uninterrupted network, consequently the possibility of multiplying its levels, and of distributing them over the entire surface to be supervised, and yet to be discrete enough not to weigh down with an inert mass on the activity to be disciplined, and not to act as a brake or an obstacle to it. To be integrated into the disciplinary mechanism as a function that increases its possible effects. It had to be broken down into smaller elements, but in order to increase its productive function, specify the surveillance, and make it functional.
There are an absolute ton of examples we can come up with. In the 20th century, the concept of middle management, the form of education, which is built off of hierarchical industrial ideals of production. In a more contemporary context, something that Foucault didn't get to witness in the same way, the entire surveillance apparatus we see. Through history, the Panopticon seems to become more and more invasive, but smaller in its form. Instead of a central tower, surveillance is decentralized across devices, security cameras, departments. It's here that we understand.
TikTok, Google, Meta, so Facebook and Instagram, Windows, Spotify. These are the three main ones that Western governments seem to like using, especially this one, for reasons, and this one. I would tax them to the fucking hilt. You want to operate? You want to operate here? You want to have access to our state, to our society? Pay your tax, motherfuckers. Will this Labour government do that? Doubtful. I want to destroy this one. Might be difficult to get rid of this. They're missing another one. We've got Amazon as well, because you've got Amazon No, don't worry about that. You can DM me. You can DM me on Discord. Should I be safe? I think I should be safe. For everyone that is in the chat, be nice. Don't bombard me.
Understand that at any moment we are being marked. More than ever, to Foucault, civil society embodies incarceration
prison
before
looks
the
bad.
fact. Disciplinary logic is found within every network needed for society to function. It's not even necessarily the visual of surveillance, but the logic embodied in social services, necessary places we see as a benefit to public good and health, such as hospitals and schools.
We are in the society of the teacher-judge, the doctor-judge, the educator-judge, the social worker-judge. It is on them that the universal reign of the normative is based, and each individual, wherever he may find himself, subjects to it his body, his gestures, his behavior, his aptitudes, his achievements. The carceral network, in its compact or disseminated forms, with its systems of insertion, distribution, surveillance, observation, has been the greatest support in modern society of the normalizing power.
It's important to see that it's not just authoritarian systems where power is executed from a centralized cabal of businessmen and politicians, albeit that dynamic plays a large role, but the execution comes from us, from citizens, normal people. We spoke about the social sentiment of a lot of stuff feeling like a giant HR department. That's the point. Human resources is the most picturesque ideal of contemporary disciplinary power.
This is where you have not met Cloudflare expectations for performance. We've decided to part ways with you.
I know you guys must not be able to understand that given in the positions that you are in, and it must be very easy for you to just have these little 10-minute, 15-minute meetings, tell someone that they're fired, completely wreck their whole life, and then that's it with no explanation.
I can absolutely understand how you feel that way, why you feel that way. And I'll be honest with you, there's nothing that we're going to say in this call and the time that we have that's going to undo the way that you feel right in this moment.
Power cannot show its hand too much. It inherently needs to manipulate, to covertly exercise itself. This is an overarching theme we often find with critical theory and how we can analyze the modern state. In many ways, what we see as authoritarian is through the lens of overt dictatorship, strong men who impose anti-democratic order. But in a sense, isn't the ability to give the appearance of freedom much more effective at control? That things like human rights, civil liberties, are able to execute the very things they supposedly stand against in the most effective manner. This conundrum reminds me of Herbert Marcuse's use of democratic unfreedom when describing the West. And in the case of disciplinary society, the often disenfranchised executing the will of power. It's a dark thing to contend with that the legitimacy of disciplinary punishment is often validated by the majority punished, but in another sense, I think this bears another element of the ironic political agency we may possess. In order for disciplinary society to operate, we technically have to operate within it. There's a permanent leverage we all contain, Yet much of critical theory after talks about how resistance of power and authority becomes subsumed within it. But being able to find fissures in existing power relations that grant common people some inlook into their agency is a good thing in my mind. I find a lot of this in Foucault's work. It's very similar to the end result of Hegel's idea of the master and slave dialectic, where through the process, slave holds a type of momentum. We'll be sure to take a look more at Foucault's other body of work at a different date, but the one constant I see is that while his work shows us the various ways philosophical history moves, and the use of power evolves such that it represses in a very similar light, it shows the hidden agency we all contain. Thank you all so much for making it to the end. As per usual, I couldn't do this without the support for all who sign up on Patreon. If you want to get early access, grant some extra content, and ensure the survival of the channel, please do consider signing up on Patreon. There's some extra special patrons I want to shout out, that being Jay Roberts, Kate, and Kevin Hoop. I truly couldn't do this without you all. You have gone above and beyond, and it means the world. Thanks so much for entrusting me to make these videos. For everyone else, I will see you in the next.
This one's a really good one. Full clarity, I'm a patron. I'm a patron of Kane Skittles. Kay is awesome. I absolutely love him.
Hey, it's Kay, and this is Skittles, architect. In the 1700s, the English legal system was crude. Serious offenders would face the gallows, while those convicted of lesser crimes might be publicly flogged, or put in stocks to be basically abused by the public. This is often depicted humorously in media, but if you think about it for a second, it's actually kind of terrifying. Needless to say, people died from this fairly often. Another popular punishment was transportation. While Australia would become much more famous for being the recipient of this practice, for decades, the British dumped their convicts in America, aiding in colonization, providing cheap labor, because chattel slavery apparently wasn't enough for these creeps, and importantly, just getting these convicts out of Britain so they didn't have to deal with them anymore. That is, until 1775, when transportation to America was no longer an option for some reason. Transportation to Australia wouldn't start up for over a decade, and by the time it did, it simply wouldn't be enough to deal with the surging number of convicts the British legal system was churning out, as it reformed to meet the needs of an urbanizing industrial society, which is a polite way of saying they made it easier to convict the poor for the crime of being poor, on account of industrialization producing so much poverty. And so the greatest minds of Britain, which in a reasonable country would have been exiled from civilization as dangerous perverts, rather than listened to for public policy, came up with a solution to all these convicts that had nowhere to go. What if we just lock them all in a big building and don't let them leave? The idea was a hit, especially when people started to realize that you could make these prisoners work, and you wouldn't have to pay them, because you stripped them of what few pesky rights a worker in the 18th and 19th centuries could be said to have. Now, prisons have existed since antiquity in some form. Early 18th century British prisons were not dissimilar to Roman or many medieval prisons. They were basically huge, overcrowded dungeons that served as vectors of disease, and, with all the prisoners gathered in one place, lent itself to prison riots. Reformers like Jeremy Bentham, inventor of the single most poignant and overused image of state surveillance, the Panopticon, stressed the need not just to contain prisoners, but to control them. Thankfully, Bentham's Panopticon was never exactly built, but the ideas he and other prison reformers put forward contributed to a series of reforms that led to every prisoner being kept in their own individual cell. But not in the way that the average prisoner is today. They were kept in that cell all day, every day. They were maybe given an hour a day out of the cell, and it was also alone. When prisoners were to move around outside their cell, they would wear masks so as to be unable to communicate with or identify each other. Total isolation. This is the origin of solitary confinement. This model of imprisonment was swiftly abandoned due to, and I quote, driving the prisoners insane. Around the same time, some Quaker sickos in America also tried keeping prisoners in solitary confinement and quickly came to that same conclusion. So why is it that on any given day, 50,000 people are in solitary confinement in the United States alone?
Oh, it's lovely.
This video required a lot of research, but I enjoyed doing it because learning about things that matter to you is really satisfying. That's why this video is sponsored by Brilliant. Brilliant is on top, and Brilliant habit your company and off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. Now that's a brilliant idea. Huh? Is that something? You like that? Back to the video. Solitary confinement as practiced today is the 24/7 confinement of prisoners to a cell like this. Sometimes with an hour or so outside their cell alone. Yeah, it's about the same as when it started. This social isolation is both physically and psychologically destructive to the victim. The symptoms of prolonged solitary confinement include chronic headaches, eyesight deterioration, digestive problems, dizziness, excessive sweating, fatigue and lethargy, genitourinary problems, heart palpitations, hypersensitivity to light and noise, loss of appetite, muscle and joint sleep pain, problems, trembling hands, weight loss, anxiety and stress, depression and hopelessness, anger, irritability and hostility, panic attacks, worsened pre-existing mental health hypersensitivity to sounds and problems smells, with attention, concentration, hallucinations that affect all of the senses, paranoia, poor impulse control, social withdrawal, outbursts of violence, psychosis, fear of death, self-harm, or suicide. Former inmate Anthony Graves, who was, after 18 years, exonerated and found to be wrongfully convicted, describes the impact solitary confinement had on inmates. I would watch guys come to prison totally sane, and in 3 years, they don't live in the real world anymore, he said. One fellow inmate, Graves said, would go out into the recreation yard, get naked, lie down, and urinate all over himself. He would take his feces and smear it all over his face. Graves himself spent a decade in solitary confinement and says he can't sleep normally, and even years after his release is prone to mood swings and complete emotional breakdowns. Solitary confinement destroys people. It is torture. Don't take it from me. The UN classifies it as torture. Any prisoner advocacy group you can think of classifies it as torture. In academia, it is so rare to have the kind of consensus you'll find around solitary confinement, but it is pretty much unanimously regarded as torture. Or at the very least, so severely harmful and detrimental to the well-being of prisoners that there aren't really any serious arguments in favor of it, other than just suggesting that the horror of it serves as some deterrent. An argument with very little evidence.
No. Super Hubby's former boss when he worked in a bar, her husband was a prison guard. Don't get me wrong, kind of, I forget. But yeah, he didn't like solitary either. I've actually talked to him about it fucking years ago. Said, where are you on this? Don't do it. Doesn't work. It's torture. Don't get me wrong. Some people do need locked up. We understand that. It's one of the sad facts of society. But yeah, solitary doesn't work. So rejoice. Millions of people across the globe are getting tortured by their governments. Fun. Don't do solitary, please. It's bad. It is truly dystopian. Don't do it.
Behind it. Craig Haney, a social psychologist at the University of California, highlights that California's especially aggressive policy of placing gang members in solitary confinement has not reduced the gang violence in their prisons. If anything, it has worsened it. That shit is torture, and on top of that, the psychological damage it does to people makes it more difficult for them to function in a prison environment, making them a greater hazard to themselves and others, and making them far, far less capable of later adjusting to life outside prison. In other words, solitary confinement reduces the probability of rehabilitation, making it totally antithetical to the purpose of the justice system. Unless rehabilitation isn't what the justice system is for. If you've heard...
Oh, excuse me. It should be. We should be using the Nordic model. It works. It's brilliant. It doesn't torture their prisoners. It doesn't torture their citizens that they've incarcerated for whatever crime they've committed. Yeah, just the Nordic model is the way to go. Plus, you have to look at the social conditions. What made these people actually do the crime? Don't get me wrong, they are criminally insane is the wrong. I don't like using that one. I used to use it quite a lot, but I've been educated since I've actually read up on this. Criminals with severe psychological issues, let's put it like that, which is a more accurate description. These people need to be... It's called the State Hospital. It's Carstairs essentially, but it's called the State Hospital for Scotland, where criminals with psychological and mental health issues, they get put into Carstairs. Oh dear God, Scribby, Super Hubby bought me that book for Christmas. It's sitting on the bookcase just down there, so I've got it now. He just went through my Amazon wish list and ordered it for me, so it's sitting there waiting for me to read. I can't wait to get into it. It's going to be... How good is it? Is it an easy enough read? Thank you, Super Hubby, much appreciated. Going through my massive Amazon book wish list, and I've got book lists on other places because I'm not paying them. Some of the books that I need to buy, they're ridiculously expensive buying brand new. So I've went Abe Books, and did you give me another one? There's another online bookstore that someone gave me. I can't remember if it was you or John that gave me it, Scribby. It was probably you. So there's other ones that I can get second hand that are like under a tenner. So I've got Dispatches from the Dark Side now. I can maybe do that one before I get you to send me a Foucault. Or maybe send me a Foucault that would complement Dispatches from the Dark Side. swearing out loud type of book when you're about what Blair it all got up to. Oh God, yeah. We all know what kind of wanker he is, obviously what kind of bastard Tony Blair is. How do we end the Tony Blair Institute? No violence towards anyone who works in it. I just don't want it to exist. And I want Blair to fuck off. He has every right to exist, obviously, maybe. But yeah, the Tony Blair Institute can get wrecked.
Heard even the shallowest critique of the American prison system, you probably know that rehabilitation isn't its strong suit. Punishment is. American prisons are notoriously violent, unsafe, and abusive as far as the first world goes, as well as sporting some of the longest sentences. When people finally get out of American prisons, 76.6% of them are rearrested within 5 years. The recidivism rate in the United States is staggering. And it's hardly any surprise. The entire country is designed to make life as difficult as possible for you, even after you've supposedly served your time in prison. Being able to find a job after prison is a huge factor in determining if somebody reoffends, and employers can discriminate against you for having a criminal record. According to the Bureau of Justice, only 12.5% of employers said they would accept an application from an ex-convict. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. You can't...
Fucking hell. How are they meant to get along if the employers won't employ them? Don't get me wrong, there's employers scattered disparately throughout the States who actually hire ex-cons. Which is good, I appreciate that. It's meant to be rehabilitatory. We're living it. It's the 21st century, for fuck's sake. I'll say again until I'm blue in the face, Nordic model, if you please.
To vote. You can be denied housing. You can't apply for federal grants. There's a huge online database called the National Inventory of Collateral Consequences of Conviction, which not only rolls off the tongue, but lists at time of recording 43,863 laws throughout the United States that deny you access to something based on ever having been convicted. Quite a lot of it is employment opportunities, and most of it is permanent. How the fuck are you supposed to be a law-abiding member of society under all these conditions? By the way, if you're released on parole, often you have to pay for your own supervision by the state. And you better be able to make rent, because in many states, becoming homeless constitutes a parole violation. And if it doesn't, quite a few of the things like public sleeping and begging that homeless people often have to do are criminalized and can violate your parole as well. So you better find some way to get money quick, bucko. Gee, I wonder how that number got so fucking high. The argument has been made strongly and repeatedly for longer than I've been alive. The American prison system simply does not rehabilitate criminals. It seemingly exists to make their lives as miserable as possible. It is a punitive institution. Therefore, arguing that solitary confinement is contradictory to the goals of rehabilitation and is needlessly cruel is kind of missing the forest for the trees. This normalized torture of prisoners is entirely in line with the intended goals of the prison system. So, returning to the question of why this is still happening, is this a situation like universal healthcare, where actually the majority of Americans want things to be done differently, but the wealthy business and political interests that profit from the current system are simply imposing their own will on the populace? Well, that's a tricky one. When people are surveyed asking whether they believe the point of the prison system should be rehabilitation or punishment, they consistently say rehabilitation. Case closed. People don't want a punitive justice system, and the way the current justice system works is entirely forced upon us by the ruling class against our own demands, right? Well, here's the thing about...
Oh, you're here. Blabbering fully aware and insisting people got sent back to countries. Ah! Rejoice, comrades, the main mod. Hello, darling. How are you? So, the lovely Shanna Cranky Pants is based in Arizona. Delightful American comrade and friend. Very good individual. Thank you for being here, my dear. Oh yeah, you fucking knew that, Scribby. Every government since the second Iraq war, they've known this. All of them, every last one of them. we've had a cavalcade of fucking ghoulish bastards has fallen. Case in point, who was it before? Who was before Cooper? Oh, Lammy. Baseness gets pinned. They should have no peace whatsoever. You're welcome, my darling.
About survey data. People are not machines. We're not always able to objectively describe and categorize all of our opinions clearly. And we are capable of holding deeply contradictory views at the same time. When surveys and focus group research is carried out asking more precise questions, respondents consistently paint a very different and very punitive.
Oh, that's fun. I like that. That's quite fun, Scribby. Oh, I wanted to ask you, one of my other streamers who I'm a mod for as well, as a musician, and he's, because he knows I'm a former drummer, he's wanting me to pick some of my favourite drum tracks and stuff. Would it be okay if I gave your video of you and Juicy Lucy with them? Oh my god, I can hear it. I can't remember his fucking name. You know what video I'm talking about. And give that one to him, saying this is one of my favourite ones, and this is a friend, this is a comrade as well. God, I love that. Damn it, I've forgotten what it's called. Thank you. Praise be, based drummer.
Picture. In a 2014 study which asked people how they perceive the living conditions in prisons, a strong majority believed life in prison was harsh. Their conditions were bad. However, 46.6% of them believed that the prison environment should be even harsher. And 41.6% said it is fine the way it is, meaning that many of those 88% of respondents acknowledge that living conditions in prisons are bad and think that's a good thing. Does that sound like people really value rehabilitation over punishment? Research by Univer and Cullen can add even more context to this. They found that people's desire for punitive measures correlates strongly to how deserving they think a prisoner is of punishment. Whether their crime was violent or not, whether they're perceived as being fully to blame for their crime, or more of a victim of circumstances, whether they're perceived as more or less likely to reoffend. And you may not be surprised to hear that Black and Latino prisoners were much more likely to be perceived as more at fault for their crimes, more inherently bad for what they've done, and therefore more deserving of punitive treatment. These attitudes are consistently reflected in survey data. People think murderers and rapists should be treated more severely than petty thieves or some guy who got locked up for having weed on him. But often, they're all in the same prison. Supporters of punitive justice are quick to cite the ever-present murderers and rapists to attack any calls for improved conditions in prisons, shorter sentencing, or even finding solutions to many crimes that don't involve locking someone in a cage for a huge portion of their life. Well, people convicted for those two crimes make up just over a quarter of prisoners, and yet they are centered in the rhetoric around prison to support policies that will hurt everyone else in there too. By the way, Look out for statistics citing violent offenders, because the US justice system categorizes a ton of non-violent crimes as violent, including burglary, even if it's an empty house. Judging by opinions on how prisons should be, it seems that people imagine...
Oh, I can't remember. Scribby, help. What one's the non-violent one? So you've got robbery and you've got burglary. I think robbery is the one with the violence. So you rob a person. So that's got that's violence or force. So that'd be that's classed as the more serious one, I believe. If I'm incorrect, please point that out. I would assume it would be you, Scribby. So you've got cat burglars. Oh, for that, Ant-Man, where Scott Lang breaks into Hank Pym's house to steal the suit. So that's burglary, so there's no violence in it, you're just breaking into someone's house.
The many people locked up for minor offenses to be an outlier. And the archetypical dangerous criminal who is just dying to kill again the second he can as the most common type of prisoner. So again, appeals to how horrible solitary confinement just aren't that effective. Because despite what we say when we're asked whether prison should be rehabilitative or punitive, people want to feel like the bad men are suffering. They want prisons to be harsh. Now...
Oh, Christ's sake. Carry on. Safe, quiet home life is a must in my opinion. Yeah, go and deal with that. The hell is it? It's 1:30 in the fucking morning. Why is the fire alarm going off? I feel free, Scribby, I really do. By the way, everyone, Scribby's upstairs neighbours are the fucking bastards. I feel for my resident philosopher. Yeah, go and deal with that. And give your kitties a scritch for me. I hope you get that dealt with. They really need to be kicked out of that. What is it? It's a block of flats, isn't it, you're in? I believe, if I remember correctly. Yeah, go and deal with that nonsense. You're more welcome to come back. I'll be going for a good few hours. Good couple of hours, so if you want to come back, feel free to. I'll just be going about to join different videos that I'm interested in and I can talk about, I can elucidate to everyone. So feel free to come back once you've got that dealt with. All the best, my comrade. Stay hydrated, not necessarily with Stella. Self-care is good care. Take your meds. Stay based. Free Palestine. And tell the crackhead upstairs to fucking behave.
Now this is conjecture, but I suspect a significant number of the responses to that first survey that asked if prison should be punitive or rehabilitative were just down to it feeling really silly to say out loud, I think the point of prisons should be to punish people, not actually reduce crime. It's just so childish.
It's so fucking backwards as well. You lock them up for whatever crime they've done. You're meant to rehabilitate while they're in there. So when they get released, they can move back into civil society, get a job, get a house, contribute towards society, things of that nature. But if you're punishing them and making it damn near fucking impossible to reintegrate back into society, that's just... And you're surprised at the recidivism rate? America, what the fuck? And I'll keep on saying, fucking Nordic model. Can you hear me yet?
need to dress it up somehow to give it some moral legitimacy. Otherwise, it's just a ridiculous opinion to have, isn't it? People who argue for...
Oh, Shanna, darling, Scribby's amazing. Praise be my resident philosopher, I love him. Thank you, Scribby, for being here. We've also got John the Brazen. He be awesome as well. We've got Sock now, you know Sock now. He visits as well. Who else have we got? We've got Jim Speak. I don't know where Jim is tonight. Jim Speak, if you can hear me. Hello, my friend. Yeah, I've got lots of good people here. I'm quite blessed, which is good. Plus you, obviously, my dear.
For punitive justice and harsher sentencing often cite the victims of crimes as their justification. They're doing it to bring justice to those who have been wronged. See, doesn't that sound more noble than making the bad men suffer so I can feel good? It's a compelling argument. I know if someone had harmed me, I would want there to be consequences. It's about more than just what's the most logical or has the best societal outcome. I don't want to live in a world where someone can just do something awful to me and get away with it. I think that's a really common and sensible response.
Don't want someone to do something awful to me and get away with it. Capitalism! Just saying. God almighty. Is that San Quentin? Would you look at that? Shanna, darling, you're not near a prison, are you? I assume there'll be a state penitentiary or a federal prison somewhere in Arizona, I would assume.
But that doesn't have to mean maximizing the suffering of the person who committed the crime. In fact, most victims of crimes don't want that at all. In a survey of victims of crimes, a strong majority preferred shorter sentences, more investment in social programs that prevent crime, accountability via systems other than prison, and 52% think prison actually makes people more likely to commit crimes, with only 19% saying they think prison helps rehabilitate people. Victims of crimes are actually more critical of prison and more supportive of rehabilitative justice than the general population. So if you're calling for harsher treatment of prisoners, be honest with yourself. You're doing it for you. It feels good to imagine that people who do bad things are punished for it. That feels like some kind of justice. But it's just a feeling, and it doesn't solve anything, and it shouldn't determine policy. The summer of 2020 had a substantial impact on how the American public thinks about policing and prison. More recent surveys have found an increasingly humane attitude towards nonviolent offenders. Remember what we said about that. With support for shorter sentences and non-prison rehabilitative programs. But when it comes to the specter of the serious violent offender, opinions are sadly pretty unchanged. 55% of Americans still support the death penalty for murderers as of 2022. It's a slight decline because the crime hysteria of the 80s and 90s saw that number balloon, but it's a minor change and isn't very different from how it's been for most of the last century. As a result, opponents of prison reform only need to say those magic words. What about the murderers and rapists? And they can torpedo support for policies that are proven to make society safer. Public support for solitary confinement has actually tanked. But fear of serious violent crime, something that is incredibly uncommon in most people's lives, is effectively weaponized time and time again to turn public support against reforms that would actually make changes that are in line with what the public, according to surveys, claims to believe. This is perhaps best demonstrated by the American response to Norway's prison system. Infamous for being soft on crime because Norwegian prisons seek to replicate normal life, rather than forcing prisoners to adjust to abnormal institutional life. So they don't feel like what we expect prison to feel like. When people exit Norwegian prisons, they are far less likely to reoffend. Their crime rates are lower across the board, and all of that has been accomplished without putting their prisoners through the most inhumane conditions possible. Importantly, their social programs are instrumental in making sure ex-convicts actually have realistic options other than turning to crime to survive after prison. But many Americans really dislike this system because it's not satisfying. The bad men aren't being punished enough. Importantly, special cases such as far-right terrorist Anders Breivik, who is pretty obviously not rehabilitated and seemingly intends to offend again, can receive extended sentences if a court decides it's appropriate, which they have, by the way. It's not like this system would have Jeffrey Dahmer back out on the street after a month. It's just not needlessly brutal, so it looks like a daycare compared to what we're used to seeing prisons as. I think far too often people hold up Scandinavian countries as these idealized progressive utopias, and they absolutely are not that. And in fact, Norway's prison system is nowhere near my first choice in how to handle the problem of crime. But it's an actually existing model that manages to be a hell of a lot more humane and effective without even being some radical abolitionist project. It's not actually that hard to not behave like the United States. We could all try it a little more. Until we shift the culture around prisons, torture like solitary confinement will continue, as well as the physical and sexual violence that plagues prisons, because safety and well-being just aren't serious considerations in an institution that, whether we formally admit it or not, is there to make people suffer. But the propaganda war that is raging around prison and punishment can sometimes obfuscate another important side of this issue. There is an economic interest in keeping torture in prisons. The United States Constitution permits forced labor, also known as slavery, if the person being subjected to it has been convicted of a crime. Nationally, incarcerated workers produce more than $2 billion per year in goods for state and private interests, and more than $9 billion per year in services for the maintenance of their prisons. They do this for literally pennies, and the work is typically not voluntary. So, say a prisoner refuses to go to work. They're already in jail, in conditions that, as we've covered, are already considered very harsh. What more can you do to them to compel them to work hard all day for basically nothing? Well, you can threaten them with a longer sentence, but that might not work. And with sentences being so long, for a lot of people, it might not make much of a difference. They're expecting to spend their lives there. So, you use torture. A report by the ACLU found that many prisoners were coerced into work under threat of solitary confinement. Here we see that solitary is being used in much the same way that the prison system itself is, to discipline and control workers. There's a reason critics of the prison system often discuss forced prison labor, and it's not just because of a moral opposition to it, but because it creates a financial incentive to keep as many people in prison for as long as possible. Economically, there's a lot of state and private institutions who benefit far more from keeping prisons full than keeping crime rates down. So again, in an environment like that, what do we expect to gain from observing that punitive prison practices like solitary confinement don't reduce crime, don't rehabilitate people? For a lot of the people in powerful positions who make decisions on how these institutions are run, that just has nothing to do with what prisons are for in their eyes. And as long as there are billions to be made from captive slave labor, don't be surprised if you find that incredibly wealthy people like Charles Koch, the only living Koch brother, can consistently find money to prop up right-wing media networks that will attack anyone attempting to reform the prison system. The ideological struggle in which we have to educate each other and build up our collective immunity to media fear-mongering about crime is directly intertwined with the economic struggle against the class that benefits from us being so afraid of each other that we foam at the mouth for longer and harsher sentences, which in effect means more captive labor, making more rich people even more money. Now, that might strike you as a despairing thought, But when I hear individual billionaires are dumping even more money into their little propaganda mouthpieces, like this guy, I get excited. People like Coke wouldn't feel the need to do that unless they felt their grasp on the culture slipping. And it is. Support for defunding police and using that money to actually fund social programs that reduce crime has never been higher. 10 years ago, that kind of thing just wasn't in the public discourse at all. Now these right-wing figureheads, whose job it is to manufacture consent for carceral politics, are acting as if it's already happened, attributing any perceived increase in crime to the supposed defunding of police departments that has not been implemented anywhere. Even the prevalence of the idea has these people scared, and to be clear, it is still not.
That's pure communism. Rejoice, comrades. Sozzled snake. Hello, Sozzled. Say hello to Sozzled, everyone. Based individual. Welcome in. 14 months. Holy fuck. Thank you. Thank you for funding this lunacy. How's it going, my friend? Sozzled is amazing. A font of knowledge, and he helps me. So praise be Sozzled.
The majority held opinion, but it used to be almost an impossible opinion to have, and now it's not. Likewise, opposition to the long sentences in American prisons is growing. A majority of surveyed adults now oppose three-strike laws, which were used to enormously extend sentence lengths. The war on drugs is now overwhelmingly seen as a disaster. 66% of Americans support eliminating criminal penalties for drug possession and reinvesting drug enforcement resources into treatment and addiction services. 64% support repealing mandatory minimum sentences for drug crimes, and 61% support commuting or reducing the sentences of people incarcerated for drugs. It can be slow, it can be very uneven, as we've seen, but people are figuring out that this way of doing things isn't producing results anyone is happy with. The summer of 2020 was a dramatic rupture, but in truth, it was also part of a continuum of growing public consciousness. That's why the rich are throwing money at ideologues tasked with reducing that consciousness. And that is why it's never been more important for us to educate ourselves and those around us as best we can. It doesn't have to be this way.
Oh, that's so much better. There we go. Look, pigtails. Ah! Fucking hell, molting again. The problems of getting old. Your hair starts falling out. Don't worry, I've got enough of it. Ah! Fucking hell. Oh, no. No, Abigail. No. No, 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 no. Oh, you can go over there now. No, Abigail. I'm not going near you. Ah! Go away. Breathe. Oh, no. Prison formers and not Bentham. Hmm.
Abolish the police! Abolish prisons! You've probably encountered these phrases on social media over the past few years. Since the murder of George Floyd in 2020, these rallying cries have grown across the United States. Prison abolition, which was once seen as extreme and unrealistic, is now a full-blown social movement. But however you feel about this, you probably have some questions, and political theory can help us navigate them. I'm Ellie Anderson, and this is Crash Course Political Theory. In her 2003 book, Our Prison...
Oh, no worries. Always a pleasure. Thank you for your re-up. Thank you. Your lass doesn't need the money, unfortunately. But yes, always a pleasure to have you here, Swizzled. But yes. Self-care is good care. Yeah. Stay hydrated, not necessarily with Stella. Self-care is good care. Take your meds if you need to take any. Stay based. Free Palestine. And tell Manfrogs to stay the fuck out of Scotland. Did you see about the candidate that Malcolm offered, the Lord offered, the reform leader in Scotland? They knew that they... I'll need to find that video, I'll get it after this one. What the fuck? Reform, get wrecked. Stay the fuck away from Scotland. Just go away. And they seem to think that they can become the government here in Scotland. Ah! Pull the other one. There's an entire brass band on it.
Obsolete. Angela Davis wrote that the prison is considered so natural that it is extremely hard to imagine life without it. And when you consider that the US has one of the highest incarceration rates in the world, it's easy to see why that's the case. We tend to assume prisons have always existed, but they've only been around in the Western world since the late 1700s. Sure, there were jails before that for short-term confinement, but nothing like the long-term carceral system we have today. So I wanted to know, what's the rationale behind our current form of prison-based punishment? Before the late 1700s, in England and colonial America, almost everything was punishable by death, which, yikes! Calm down, ye old folks. In this context, the idea of prisons was seen by some as a humane alternative. Which brought me to the 19th century philosopher Jeremy Bentham, who argued that the
It's a sad fact that if you talk about prisons, or if you want to research about prisons, especially here in the UK, you're going to come up against this individual, unfortunately. Jeremy Bentham, you're a bit of a weird one, and yeah, your idea of the Panopticon can go and fuck itself.
point of punishing lawbreakers is to keep people from breaking the law, also known as deterrence, which you can do in two ways. You can deter would-be criminals by having a serious enough penalty, scaring them out of committing the crime in the first place. Or you can deter repeat offenders by physically stopping them from doing it again.
On the whole, in most Western or global North societies, deterrence doesn't fucking work, because quite a lot of crime that happens in globalised economies is because of their social situation, their home life and things of that nature. So you fix the problems here while haven't committed the crime yet. You make it better you make the society better, you fund it, you do things, you make housing better infrastructure, the more jobs, things like that. That's how you stop it. You don't. Deterrence as a philosophy, especially when in the carceral system, has been proven not to work. But they still insist on fucking doing it. David Lamy and Shabana Mahmood, can you fucking hear me? I've got an insider. Family members of Procurator Fiscal, which is basically a lawyer here in Scotland. For you lovely Americans, think of them as like a mix between a DA and a police officer, an actual investigator. They've got the fiscals. Fiscals have more powers than what they have down in England, which is basically barristers who work for the DBP. So, I quite like our system up here. Don't get me wrong, it's not fucking perfect. It does need fixed in certain aspects, but it's better than England's version. They started off with the same one as ours. They adopted our one and took it down to England, and they've slowly fucking changed it and kind of corrupted it in certain sections. And they're saying, why isn't this working? Because you fucking changed our better one. What do you think was going to happen when you brought in these fucking measures? We've been telling you this for the last 180 years when you fully adopted our legal system. But no, we've been telling you for the best part of 2 centuries, if you do these changes, there's going to be consequences over here or in that section or this part of the prison system, the carceral system. You didn't listen to us, so get wrecked.
Like by locking them up, and or using a strategy Bentham thought was even more effective: surveillance. Bentham envisioned a prison where someone is always watching, or at least might be. Imagine a circular building with an open space in the middle. The walls are lined with cells, with one prisoner in each cell, and in the middle there's a watchtower. A guard in this watchtower can see into every single cell, but the prisoners can't see the guard. Of course, the guard can't actually be looking in every cell at every minute, but the prisoners always know the guard might be watching them. And so, Bentham thought, they would be deterred from stepping out of line. He called his creation the Panopticon.
Wouldn't fucking work. As I'll keep on telling you throughout this video, the deterrence doesn't work. We have so much data and information about this now that we've been collating for a few decades, probably the best part of a century at this point. Deterrence as a concept is a proven failure, at least in my opinion. But I'm outside this. I'm not involved in this sort of area. I haven't done much research into it. I've done a bit, don't get me wrong. I'm insatiable. I like getting knowledge, which is a good thing. Those who do not heed history are doomed to repeat it. America, can you hear me?
If this sounds incredibly creepy to you, you're not alone. 150 years or so later, the philosopher Michel Foucault appropriated Bentham's idea and offered a new way of thinking about modern punishment and its impacts on European society. To Foucault, the Panopticon was a metaphor for a power system that influenced all parts of society, from prisons to hospitals to factories. Wherever you go and whatever you do, Big Brother might be watching. Foucault argued that people who live under this system of control eventually become their own wardens. They internalize the power structure and adjust their behavior accordingly. No prison necessary, which on one level sounds like deterrence at work. But it also sounds more than a little disturbing.
Criminalising your society, your citizenry. Delightful. Yeah, that's going to work well for you, isn't it? Oh, fucking hell. That's why we have to counter Shabana Mahmood at every fucking turn. And David Lammy, because he's the Justice Secretary as well. So new, and Deputy Leader. Deputy Prime Minister, the Deputy Leader is Lucy Powell. So it used to be one job, it used to be one person doing that, who was Angela Rayner. But the things happened. Angela, you fucking idiot. What were you doing? You should have just listened to your fucking solicitors. Really. And your tax advisor. Just saying. So, Shabana Mahmood and David Lammy, they're wanting to do things like this. Get wrecked. Seriously, just fuck off. Nah.
In Foucault's words, the Panopticon presents a cruel, ingenious cage. Today, some argue we're all living in a panopticon, digitally speaking. People on both the left and the right point to the state's increased ability to surveil its citizens through technology. Whether that means watching security camera footage or reading my group chats about The Bachelor. But okay, even with that level of security, you can't deter everybody from committing crimes. So what happens when they do? And what do we hope to achieve by punishing them? I learned you can break down the intended purposes of criminal punishment into 3 overarching categories: retribution, reformation, and restoration. But first, I'm gonna need to level up my coffee game. Almost too pretty to drink. When the point of criminal justice is to avenge victims, it's called retributive justice, an eye for an eye. Today, very few political theorists, or even pro-prison...
An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth makes the whole world blind and toothless. Retributive justice doesn't fucking work either. Yeah. Rehabilitation. Educate them while they're inside. Put better structures in place once they're released to help them reintegrate back into society. This has been proven to work across the world in certain places. I don't see my government doing that, which is problematic to say the least. Recidivism is an issue. So that's doing more crime once you're released from serving time. Do rehabilitation. It has been proven to work. Thank you. Can I be heard, you think? I don't think I am, but fuck, I'll still keep on saying this shit anyway.
Would openly subscribe to this rationale, which can feel very outdated or Game of Thronesy. Instead, the modern Western world takes the reformative justice approach. This version doesn't set out only to penalize an offender. It theoretically aims to correct their behavior. You can hear it in the words we use. Correctional facility, corrections officer, Reformative justice thinks of criminality as a condition that prison or other sentences can treat. At least in theory, an offender walks into prison a criminal and comes out a law-abiding citizen, ready to rejoin society. But here's the thing. If we fail to make good on efforts to reform people who've committed crimes, we sort of end up with a retributive justice system, whether we like it or not. That's why, more recently, there's been a greater push for a third way: restorative justice. Proponents argue neither reformation nor retribution addresses the needs of everyone involved in a crime. In this view, crime isn't just a violation of the law. It's a violation of social relationships. And to hold offenders responsible for their actions would require them to repair the harm done. For example, the Victim Offender Education Group pairs an offender with a surrogate victim, someone who's been affected by a similar crime, to exchange their stories. The goal is to help both victim and offender find common ground and heal from the experience. In this case, justice becomes about more than just punishing one individual. It's about understanding the pain on both sides of the victim and offender relationship, what reformative justice advocates want to normalize. It's important to note that experiments in restorative justice have been on a relatively small scale. We don't have examples of it on a large-scale civic level, at least not yet. But whatever it might look like in practice, the prison abolition movement provokes us to think deeply about incarceration and ask if these rationales for punishment really hold up. Let's go back to Angela Davis, the prison abolitionist I mentioned at the beginning. She gave a name to the network of systems that uses surveillance, policing, and imprisonment to address economic, social, and political problems. She called it the prison industrial complex, which is a riff on the military industrial complex, a phrase you might have heard of before. Police forces, private prisons, companies that provide food to incarcerated people or use prison labor, they all benefit financially from incarceration. And this is all wrapped up with pervasive racial inequalities in our country. Kareem, can you throw that Black American History episode on screen? Thanks. But what about the people who should theoretically benefit from prisons? The people sent there to be reformed. Prison abolitionists make the case that prisons actually harm more than they help. Because of the growing number of incarcerated people, U.S. prisons are overcrowded, which can affect living conditions, safety, and access to meaningful programs and mental health services. Prisons isolate people, taking them away from family and friends. And the harm can continue even after a person is released. Having a record makes it hard to get a job or find a place to live. So, if prison is meant to be reformative, but it ends up creating new harms, where does that leave us? Well, that's where the call to abolish prisons comes in. To do so would require reducing the number of incarcerated people. In other words, decarceration. But then what? There are people in prison who have committed seriously violent offenses. Do we just let them out? Turns out, most...
Natok, my comrade, my American friend. What's your take on what it's like over there? I'd love to know. I'd want to change it, essentially. Don't get me wrong, our prison system here in Scotland and the wider UK isn't great. It's literally crumbling down in England. Literally, the prisons are falling to bits. Who's that from? Emma Graceless. Am I subscribed to Emma? What the fuck? Who done that? I'd love to know your take on the prison industrial complex. No prison system is completely perfect, obviously. There's ones that are better than what you have over there and what we have here in the UK. But no one is completely perfect. Not one. There isn't a shining beacon. that we can hold on to. The Nordic model does work a little bit better than what we've got here in the UK and what you have in the States, like Canada as well to a certain extent.
Most prison abolitionists have thought about this. They tend to suggest replacing prison with other strategies to rehabilitate offenders, like restorative justice approaches, and offering more robust services that prevent crime before it even happens, like broader mental health and substance abuse programs. And many people argue that there's still a place for prisons, just a radically reduced one. Tommy Shelby, an advocate for prison reform, agrees that most of the alternatives that Angela Davis suggests, like rehab, mental health support, and restorative justice, are more effective crime deterrents than the ones we have now. But he argues that sometimes we'll need to incapacitate people who've committed violent crimes, and we can't reintroduce them to society. Still, the world he imagines is one with way fewer prisons. And that word, imagine, is essential. Political theory is about imagining a better world. And part of that exercise is to set aside the practical considerations for a moment and think about who we want to be. Contending with these ideas is good and healthy, even if you and me and everyone else watching reach different conclusions. When it comes to prisons and mass incarceration, it can seem like the place we're in is inevitable. The prison abolition movement asks us to remember that it's not inevitable, and that we are active agents in deciding the kind of world we want to live in. Next time, we'll talk about utopia, and if it's really too good to be true. See you then. Thanks for watching this episode of Crash Course Political Theory, which was filmed at the Bastille Studio and was made with the help of all these nice people. If you want to help keep Crash Course free for everyone forever, you can join our community on Patreon.
I'll ask you again, what's your take on the prison system in the States, Natok? I'd love to know. Thank you, Natok. Thank you.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with one.
Oh yeah, definitely free labour. That's slavery. That's slavery.
Gonzalez.
Well, the struggle to overhaul the criminal justice system in the United States has reached a pivotal moment. From the Obama administration's push to reform harsh and racially biased sentencing for drug offenses to the recent decision by New York State to reform its use of solitary confinement, there is a growing momentum toward rethinking the system. But new battles have also emerged, like the fight over stand your ground laws in states like Florida, where a number of recent court cases have highlighted the issue of racial bias.
Oh, I'm here for the Greenlanders. I'm here for the Greenlanders. There's a comrade who's over in Edinburgh. They are a lovely individual. I can't give a duck. Praise be them. They've got friends in Greenland. And they are keeping us updated on what's happening and how they're feeling and things like that, which is good. A source of information and what's actually happening on the ground in Greenland is a good thing to know. Thank you, I can't give a duck. Much appreciated, my friend. So I'm in Glasgow. They're in Edinburgh at the other end of the M8, so we're separated by the major motorway here in the central belt of Scotland. And they are keeping us updated on that. Tangerine dictator, get to fuck. Just, no, fuck off.
In the court system. Marissa Alexander, an African-American woman of color who fired what she says was a warning shot into a wall near her abusive husband, is facing up to 60 years in prison at her retrial. Michael Dunn, who shot and killed an African-American teenager in a dispute over loud music in the same state of Florida, is facing a minimum of 60 years for attempted murder. But the jury failed to convict him of the central charge in the case, the murder of Jordan Davis, a case that for many recalled the shooting of Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman.
To talk more about these issues, we spend the rest of the hour with the world-renowned author, activist, scholar Angela Davis, professor emerita at the University of California, Santa Cruz. For over 4 decades, she's been one of the most influential activists and intellectuals in the United States. She's speaking here in New York on Friday at the Beyond the Bars conference up at Columbia University. It's great to have you here, Angela.
Thank you, Amy.
Do you sense progress?
Well, yes. I think that this is a pivotal moment. There are openings, and I think it's very important to point out that people have been struggling over these issues for years and for decades. This is also a problematic moment, and those of us who identify as prison abolitionists as opposed to prison reformers make the point that oftentimes reforms create situations where mass incarceration becomes even more entrenched. And so therefore we have to think about what in the long run will produce decarceration, fewer people behind bars, and hopefully eventually in the future the possibility of imagining a landscape without prisons where other means are used to address issues of harm, where social problems such as illiteracy and poverty do not lead vast numbers of people along a trajectory that leads to prison.
I'm wondering, in terms the first term of President Obama was often referred to by some as through the myth of post-racial America represented by the election of President Obama. But even he has shied away until recently dealing with some of the racial inequities of our system, especially the prison system. I'm wondering if you could see a movement of transformation in the president himself and how he deals with some of these issues.
Well, this is the second term. He really has nothing to lose. And it really is about time that he began to address what is one of the most critical issues in this country. It's pretty unfortunate that that Obama has waited until now to speak out, but it's good that he is speaking out, and I think we can use this opportunity to perhaps achieve some important victories.
Explain what you mean, Angela, the difference between being a prison abolitionist, how you describe yourself, and a prison reformer.
Well, of course, in 1977, when the Attica Rebellion took place, that was a really important moment in the history of mass incarceration, the history of the prison in this country. The prisoners who were the spokespeople for the uprising indicated that they were struggling for a world without prisons. During the 1970s, the notion of prison abolition became very important, and as a matter of fact, public intellectuals, judges, journalists took it very seriously and began to think about alternatives. However, in the 1980s, with the dismantling of social services, structural adjustment in the global South, the rise of global capitalism, we began to see the prison emerging as a major institution to address the problems that were produced by the deindustrialization, lack of jobs, less funding into education, lack of education, the close down of systems that were designed to assist people who had mental and emotional problems. And now, of course, the prison system is also a psychiatric facility. I always point out that the largest psychiatric facilities in the country are Rikers Island in New York and Cook County in Chicago. So the question is, how does one address the needs of prisoners by instituting reforms that are not going to create a stronger prison system? Now there are something like 2.5 million people behind bars if one counts all of the various aspects of what we call the prison industrial complex, including military prisons, jails in Indian country, state and federal prisons, county jails, immigrant detention facilities, which constitute the fastest growing sector of the prison industrial complex. So the question is, how do we respond to the needs of those who are inside, and at the same time begin a process of decarceration that will allow us to end this reliance on imprisonment as a default method of addressing, not addressing really major social problems.
And how do you see the changing public attitudes toward war on drugs and the willingness of some states now to begin a decriminalization process and recognize drug addiction more as a health problem than as a criminal justice problem? Do you see that having some hope of sharply reducing the prison population?
Yes, I think it is important, but again, it's also essential to point out that people have been struggling around these issues for a very long time. And oftentimes when these new moments emerge, it is as if the legislators have come up with this idea for the very first time. And of course it is important that decriminalization is happening in certain states, because drugs have served the so-called war on drugs, which, as we know, has been a war on poor communities, Black and Latino communities all over the country. That so-called war on drugs has been the major motor driving the rising prison population. So I often point out we need to look at the corresponding pharmaceutical industrial complex when we think about the way drugs have served as a pretext for incarcerating such vast numbers of people of color.
What about the for-profit system, the for-profit prison system?
Well, they're private prisons, of course. The U.S. has given rise to this private prison.
Prisons should not be private. They should not be for profit. This is a thing that society, that the government, the state, if you wish, has to be in control of, in my opinion at least. Don't get me wrong, I want either complete reform or abolition, because this prison industrial complex, especially over in the States, is just, oh fucking hell, just wrong in so many fucking ways.
Industry, Corrections Corporation of America was the first private prison corporation, and now of course we have institutions like G4S, which is the third largest private corporation in the entire world, third only to number one, Walmart, number two, Foxconn. And this security corporation, which owns and operates prisons all over the country, which is involved in the
all over the world actually for G4S. I can't remember if they're a British or an American company. Give me a minute. I was right. Rejoice. One of the biggest parts of the prison industrial complex is a British company. What the absolute fuck? I don't like G4S. A former partner of mine and a couple of comrades who are no longer with us, they worked for G4S. They were security. They were door stewards, and they were security for like gigs and stuff like that. They weren't part of like the prison part of the company. And I asked them about it, including my ex. I said, what are they like? Oh, he runs his own company. He's a freelancer now. And he has kind of a company on his own. And I asked him, opinion on G4S. Bastards. Don't beat around the bush. Spit it out, man. I do not like G4S. Or Securitel as well. That's another one here. They work here in the UK. G4S. Holy fuck.
Production of the carceral technologies used in occupied Palestine by Israel, which is involved in deporting prisoners from Europe to the global south, from the U.S. to Mexico. One begins to see how it all comes together. But I think that private prisons are not the only indication of the a thoroughgoing corporatization of punishment. Even public prisons rely on private corporations, and healthcare has been outsourced. Food production has been outsourced. The few programs that there are in prisons have been outsourced. So there is a privatization of imprisonment such that that it's not possible to consider the issue of mass incarceration without looking at the important role it plays in the economy. And this means, of course, that people who have very little to do with criminal justice, with punishment, have no stakes in that really, have stakes in the continued increase in prison populations because it means more profit for them.
We're going to break and then come back to this discussion. I want to also ask you about feminism, where that plays in as we move in on International Women's Day, March 8th, on Saturday. We're speaking with Angela Davis, the author, the activist, the professor. Stay with us.
Okay, how long's no been going? Give me a minute, everyone. Tail dragon's going. Cool. It's only been going an hour. Ooh. Cute. Oh, no, Jordan's there.
We're so fucked. They're gonna want to come over here for 40 years. Like, I'll be old by the time people are like, yeah, we'll give America a shot again. A lot of Americans want nothing to do with the U.S. either. That's true, APWW. That's true. Very true. Oh,
yeah, let's raid Q for a change.
Alright. Well, that's all the trash I did. That's all the trash I had for the night. So, if you want to stay here and watch about... if you want to stay here... Speaking of Israel, one of the... Where the trans is taking over Transnistria? Is that what that is? Transnistria for Argento state? We need to organize. We do. We need to organize. Alright, chat. So what's gonna happen now is if you want to stick around and watch about 80 laps of a NASCAR race with me, you can. If you don't, I ain't gonna blame you. But if you do, I'm gonna think you're extra cool, okay? So this is dead ass what we're doing.
Let's go to Gnome, shall we?
Sentinel! Of the Earth depends on these tattooed teenage alien fighters from Beverly Hills.
Stay hydrated. Self-care is good care. Take your meds if you need to take any. Stay based. Free Palestine. And keep an eye on the Tangerine Dictator in the Oval Office, if you're American. Or, I don't know, keep a close eye on Shabana Mahmood and David Lammy, if you're here in the UK. Or Manfrog, if you wish. Fuck it, why not? No, I just have to keep an eye on that fucking political chameleon. Manfrog, get wrecked. And there's no way, shape or form that Lord Offord is going to be First Minister.
Throne room, I have to imagine, was like, they blew all their budget on this. This throne room is awesome.